Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a structured, documentary-style look into a pretty fascinating organizational model, the Assembly Militia. Now, since you're already familiar with state assemblies, state nationals, and the foundational four pillars of the assembly, you know that understanding the actual nuts and bolts of these organizations is absolutely crucial. Our goal today is to dig straight into the source documents to explore the specific purpose, structure, and definition of the Assembly Militia. We'll be breaking down exactly how these texts envision local readiness, public safety, and community support. So let's dive right in.
Right off the bat, to really understand what the Assembly Militia is, we have to look at how the source material anchors its very foundation. The text states explicitly, and I quote, "The militia is equivalent to a community national guard, always prepared and ready for service." What's really interesting here is that this frames the militia not as some sort of offensive military outfit, but rather as a well-regulated internal security force. Its primary mandate, according to the documents, is all about community protection and proactive readiness right within the boundaries of your specific state.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 5 key areas: defining the militia, eligibility and participation, preparedness and public safety, communications and support, and finally, integrating the 4 pillars.
All right, jumping right into Section 1, defining the militia. The source documents draw a really distinct legal and operational line in the sand here. On one side, we have actual state militias. These are manned by state citizens with a strict, unwavering focus on community safety. The text contrasts this directly with state-of-state militias, or the National Guard, classifying those as quasi-military organizations manned by territorial U.S. citizens or corporate shareholders. The crucial point the source makes is this clear jurisdictional split: localized, citizen-led community safety over here versus federally integrated corporate-level military structures over there.
To make this definition a bit more concrete, the text uses a really specific historical analogy, comparing the Assembly Militia to the system of the Swiss cantons. The core idea here is beautifully simple. It's community safety on a statewide basis. Imagine your own neighborhood operating this way, with members taught practical, defensive, and life-saving skills. Yes, this definitely includes firearms safety and marksmanship, but equally important, it heavily emphasizes first aid and training in specialized support roles. It's a completely localized, safety-first mandate.
Moving on to Section 2, eligibility and participation.
So, who can actually participate? The criteria laid out in the texts are remarkably straightforward. You just need to be over 21 years of age, hold either a state national or state citizen status, and be physically alive and well. And crucially, there is 0 property ownership required, beyond owning your own body, of course. This really highlights the intensely egalitarian nature of the text. It's designed to be highly accessible, explicitly noting that unless you're holding an elected office, there's no specialized vetting required just to join up and participate. And that brings us to something the text hammers home again and again: radical inclusivity. The documents explicitly expect participation from all able-bodied members, but they define that term incredibly broadly. For example, the text points out that even if you're an 85-year-old whose only physical capability at this point is doing some paperwork or making sandwiches, you are a completely eligible, active, and highly valued part of your local militia. It's a literal all-hands-on-deck philosophy where absolutely every small task counts.
Okay, Section 3, preparedness and public safety.
Now, when we say public safety, you might immediately think of defense against human threats, but the militia's operational scope expands way beyond that. When a tornado touches down or floodwaters start to rise, their focus pivots instantly to natural disaster response. State commanders actually have the authority to pull in mutual assistance from neighboring counties or even coordinate with the local National Guard if the situation is dire enough. The mandate here is to be the organized, immediate, boots-on-the-ground local response the second nature strikes. To juggle these pretty massive responsibilities, the texts establish specialized standing committees. So beyond your standard defense and disaster preparedness groups, there is a massive focus on sustainability and alternative health. And you might be wondering, why does that matter for a militia? Well, because the source recognizes that true public safety requires long-term holistic health and resource management, not just physical security. I mean, let's face it, you can't protect a community if it literally can't sustain itself.
So this holistic approach translates into active, everyday community building. We're talking mandates to organize community gardening, establish seed banks, and manage shared food storage. It even extends to setting up natural healing centers and offering education in community survival. By blending these diverse, peaceful skill sets together, the documents argue that a community is building a truly, deeply prepared militia from the ground up.
Shifting gears a bit to Section 4, Communications and Support.
Imagine the grid goes down tomorrow. When standard systems fail, communication becomes a literal lifeline. Being able to connect with your fellow Americans during a massive disaster is a primary responsibility here. Because of that, the militia is tasked with establishing unbreakable emergency communication networks. The texts heavily mandate utilizing ham radios and satellite phones, and importantly, actually providing the training so folks know how to use them. They even push for old-fashioned, highly structured phone trees. It's simple, reliable tech that can absolutely save lives when the modern grid goes dark.
And backing all of those communications up is a seriously robust administrative backbone. Specialized support committees manage all the logistical heavy lifting. You've got the Provisions Committee acting as quartermaster to evaluate and handle equipment needs. The Education Committee developing training programs and tests. The Operations Committee evaluating readiness alongside peacekeeping task forces. And finally, the Membership Committee, which vets and places candidates exactly where their unique, specific skills are needed most.
Finally, Section 5. Integrating the 4 pillars.
This is actually one of the most fascinating structural rules laid out in the entire text, the total rejection of positional authority. Basically, you don't get to command people simply because you have some arbitrary title or won an election to a chairmanship. Instead, governance relies entirely on functional authority. That means leadership is based purely on your ability, your cooperation, and your competence in a specific crisis. This brilliant little rule prevents bureaucratic power struggles and lets members seamlessly overlap their roles across the Jural and General Assemblies.
So how do they scale this massive cooperation? They do it through a concept called the Committee of the Whole. Basically, county militia coordinators actually work together as a unified, statewide team, with the state militia coordinator acting as the chair. Think about it. Disasters don't respect county lines, and neither does this structure. It allows members to rapidly cross borders, providing massive mutual assistance anywhere in the state or even across state lines during widespread emergencies. When you step back and look at the sheer scale of local readiness outlined in these documents, it really forces you to ask a tough question. If the grid went down tomorrow, is your community truly prepared to seamlessly support and protect itself without relying on outside help? Ultimately, as the source texts mandate, the Assembly Militia is intended to serve as a community-based resource focused on preparedness, public safety, and mutual support.